The Electoral Commission of South Africa says it's working on strengthening its capacity, which will enable it to hold political parties accountable for violating the Political Party Funding Act. The IEC has raised concerns over parties that fail to meet deadlines for submitting the required funding information. The Commission says it's currently limited when it comes to investigating some issues that are raised with regard to violations. For more on this, let's bring in My Vote Counts researcher Robyn Pasensie, who joins us via our video link this morning. Robyn, it's great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us on the AM report. So I think we're in the second year of implementing this Political Party Funding Act. I wonder how you reckon the first year has gone and whether or not there are any lessons to be learned there.
Hi, good morning, Anna. Thank you for having me on the show. Yes, you're absolutely right. We are in the second year of the PPPA. This is cumulatively the fifth set of disclosures that we've seen. And yes, there is something to be learned. I think as time goes on and we receive more and more disclosures, we can make sort of broader claims around what we are seeing in party funding and money in our politics. But I think one of the most salient things that we have been able to glean from the disclosures thus far have been that there are really only a few individuals that fund our political parties. In almost every case of a political party that is disclosed, and this includes last year as well, about 2 to 3 major donors are present in each political party, and they account for about 50 to 70% of that party's overall private donations that they receive. And that is kind of similar in this fifth set of disclosures that we've seen. For example, the ANC received a donation of 10 million rand, and that donation was given to them solely by a company called the Boto Commercial Enterprise, which upon further investigation by us, we found that Dries Motsepe is its sole director, for example. In the DA, similar story, they have a repeat donor as well in Fynbos Equity, who donated 15 million rand to the party, which is also the upper limit that you can get under the PPPA.
I wonder what we should think of that, right? I mean, we'd always wanted to know who's funding our political parties. There it is. The information is now out there. How should we respond to what we're finding, which is the fact, as you've mentioned, that it appears to be a handful of people keeping these parties going?
Well, I think there are really two broad responses that we can give to this, and I'll put them in two categories. One sort of from a civil society activist point of view, and the other for the ordinary citizen who may not be part of a activist community or civil society organization. And on the one hand, I think given this information, it's incumbent upon us, especially organizations like MVC, this is the time when we really need to have advocacy and public pressure. Because part of what we need to do is make it very clear, make it known that this is not something that we find acceptable. We don't want to see the issue that I've just described where 2 or 3 very rich individuals are essentially paying the way for our political parties, and it remains unclear what that money does for political decision making. So there needs to be a far bigger light shed on that, and we need to continue pushing for advocacy, public pressure really, for helping, making them see the error of their ways there. And then the second part is, part of the reason why we have this information is because there was a push for greater transparency in the access to our information around party funding. So I would hope that as voters, you take this especially to the ballot box, that you show your dissatisfaction or your appreciation, if that is the case, at that space and tell your party representative through your vote whether you are happy or not. And even at the local level as well, and even lower down with your municipal levels and at your ward councillors, and express to them your dissatisfaction with what you think your party is or is not doing.
Yeah, I must say it's incredibly interesting to find out who's funding these political parties, because the immediate question, of course, is around motive. Why? So, for instance, what we've learned in the last, call it wave, or the last round of disclosures, is that Michael Leroux, who apparently is the founder of Capitec Bank, is the one behind the millions that were given to the DA. Now, Capitec Bank typically services people who some might say are not always immediately associated with the DA. I mean, have there been any surprises for you?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. That is one of the surprises that we have. I think we should stop saying we are surprised each time we see the set of PPPA disclosures, because I think that should be built in. And I think it's important that now that we have the PPPA, we can actually interrogate that. And as I said, that is through Fynbos Equitate, that multi-million rand donor to the DA, who's also donated to them previously. In previous quarters, they've donated 5 million rand to the DA. We crunched some numbers, and if you look at that, Fynbos Equitate donated over 20 million rand to the DA. They make up a third of the overall money that the DA has received cumulative since the PPPA has been in effect the 1st of April. So it is very interesting. And the paramount question is, why are you doing that? For what purpose? We can't say for certain yet. We may have inklings or feelings around this, but the work for MDC is now to show what is your money buying you, if anything at all.
Yeah. Sure, fascinating. I mean, we had always expected that there'd be, let's call them glitches, hiccups in implementing a new act like this Political Party Funding Act. And I'm sure there's still some room to improve insofar as collecting these submissions and holding people accountable if they don't submit on time. Where do you reckon the loopholes still are?
I'm sorry, I lost sound there. Where do you reckon we are?
Where do you reckon some of the loopholes in implementing this act still lie?
I think there are a few weaknesses, absolutely. And I think one of the main ones is around the threshold amounts. So we have 100,000 rand, which is the declarable amount, and that is what you will see in each quarter, amounts over that. And the 15 million rand, which is the yearly cap per donor to a party. But what we've been seeing is that particularly that 15 million rand seems to be easily circumventable. And I will use the example of this current set of disclosures that have come out. So the largest donor, as I said, to the ANC was a company called the Botu Commercial Enterprise. If you were to have a quick Google search of that, it doesn't really throw up much. You don't know who its directors, trustees are, if any. You don't see that. We dug a little deeper, and that's where we found, actually, the sole director of this company is Patrice Motsepe, who through his other two companies also donated money to the ANC, that's with African Rainbow Minerals and Harmony Gold. He could also donate as a private individual, a personal individual, not through his companies. So you or I could have many registered companies in our name, make donations through that and personally as well, and we can each do that to the amount of 15 million rand. So you can easily just bypass that upper limit. Also, interrelated funds. So, for example, if you and I were family, but we have one source of family wealth, and we are actually taking from that family wealth to, let's say, donate money, the PPPA will see us as two separate people, and they won't count that as coming from the same pot, so to speak. It will be two separate pieces. So I think that is a concern. And I think also, which I want to highlight here, the PPPA doesn't explicitly cover holding companies' regulations around that, investments or investment vehicles. So in terms of tracking money, the sources of where it's coming from, that still remains a bit obscured in terms of being declared under the Act.
Sure. Once again, really fascinating stuff. Robyn, thanks very much indeed for the work that you do and for agreeing to speak to us this morning. Really do appreciate it. Robyn Pasensie is with My Vote Counts, helping us connect the dots about what we should think about the implementation of the Political Party Funding Act. Once again, thanks very much indeed.